Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and today I'm speaking with Jason Beckton. He's the Managing Director of Prospech Limited. They've got precious metals and rare earths. Now, the ASX code is PRS, and they've got projects. A lot of people will know that they've got projects in Slovakia. They've been focused on that for a little while. But the reason I've asked Jason to come and chat to me today is because they've recently picked up some projects in Finland. Now, these are rare earths and precious metals, if I'm correct. Now, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's rare earths and precious metals in Finland. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah, that's right, generally.
Done my homework. Jason, without me taking all of the commentary, why don't you? This is the first time we've had a chat on small caps, so why don't you tell our listeners who you are, and then we'll get into some of the details of Slovakia and Finland.
All right. Well, thanks, Kerry. As you said, the board of PRS, as an exploration entity, we've been listed since 2020 with the help of Peloton, and now we've just completed a raise with the help of BW Equities to continue exploration efforts exclusively in the EU, and that remains the case because the Finland assets are also in the EU, obviously, in the EEC, and we unapologetically have a wheelhouse or an expertise area of Brownfields assets, and they are, in the past, generally precious metals. We have had some strategic metals drilling done in the past, including tungsten and antimony in Slovakia. However, what correctly caught the market's attention in the last few weeks was 2 rare earth and 1 lithium project in Finland, which we've been working on in a separate company for about 4 years, but we kept underfunded, and then via a share transaction or JV brought into PRS.
Oh.
So they've with independent directors' consent and valuation. So we know the assets very well. We know Finland very well, but correctly in the past anyway, Slovakia was the focus. So I guess in essence, it's your standard exploration offering on the ASX PRS, but we have one key differentiator in that we focus on mostly resource or data-rich projects already. We're not a greenfields explorer.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you because you said brownfields. Some people won't understand that, and so could you just explain brownfields so that
I think investors in PRS are already exposed to enough risk when it comes to discovery and resource definition, and so we don't expose them to tough geopolitical risk, and that's obvious. Finland and Slovakia pro-mining, EU jurisdictions. But we also don't expose them to large greenfields, high-risk endeavours, which are generally the remit of the larger companies. We have a limited budget with a limited share base, so we want to expose long-term shareholders and investors to immediate results, if you like. Obviously, they're not simplifying it. We know that projects near old mines or amongst old mines do need sometimes they need extra permitting, things like that. But we've done it in the past in Mexico, for example, and we continue to operate that way.
Okay, so a lot of people would understand. There's lots of chat about Africa. There's lots of chat about Australia, even the US, Canada. We don't often find a lot of projects in Europe. So I want to ask you this question, Jason. I've known you for a number of years. You've been successful in the past. Why Slovakia and why Finland? Now, you did say they're good jurisdictions, but I'm sure our audience out there would be the same as me, is I kind of go, I don't really know that much about those areas.
Sure. Yeah. So the main thing you look for is overlooked opportunity, and therein lies the brownfields piece. And it's not always in WA, Kalgoorlie, where I've spent two stints, or it's not always in Broken Hill, and it can be. Our criteria, though, is it has to be a known area in the past of safe investment by foreign capital. So, okay. For example, Slovakia is rated #1 by OECD for foreign direct investment in Europe. Finland, I think, needs less description. It's obviously almost corrupt-free, and many foreign in direct investment sources there as well. Slovakia, back on that for a moment, it for example, is completely within the EU, the EEC, NATO, so it's got the same status now as Finland. It's part of a manufacturing hub of Central Europe, but also importantly, foreign interests are involved, such as US steel, oil and gas drilling in the Vienna Basin. We have magnesite operations owned by foreign entities in central Slovakia. There's other ASX juniors exploring to our north, such as MTC. And most of the laws are subject to scrutiny of Brussels as well. So the criteria you should use for any junior that's not in Australia is, are they in an overall jurisdiction that's safe?
Okay.
And the analogy I used in the past working in Mexico with Polynesia was we were protected by NAFTA. In the case of the EU, you're protected by the Brussels trade agreements, and recently the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is not protecting us but helping us. So we like to be in jurisdictions where you're appreciated and you're not trying to educate the government on.
Yeah.
Because we don't lobby, we're too small for that. We just follow the law. And so far, foreign interests in Slovakia and, of course, Finland haven't been treated in any sub-commercial way, say like coal miners recently in Queensland or whatever. We definitely we vote with our dollars, because I know shareholders, every dollar they give us, they've already spent tax on it, so it's really $1.50, and we're very careful where we invest.
And that's a good acknowledgement that people, I don't hear from very many directors that, this is $1.50 of taxpayer investor money. So,
well, it's already a risky endeavour as it is. So we appreciate people who invest in the company and they're owners of the business, and we want to. Of course, there's risk. We've had a few years of fair to middling drill results on the gold silver assets, and we acknowledge that. The rare earths initiative is not a knee-jerk overnight decision. We've been working on it for a year or two. But there's been an element of serendipity with the coming out of the Critical Raw Materials Act out of the EU. So current and older, and well, when I say older, longer term shareholders in the company have been rewarded for their loyalty. We like to see people in the black, like the recent raise was at 2 cents, and we're well above that now. And those speculative comments to one side, the main thing is drill results. So what I don't like to see in a company that I invest in on my personal account, for example, is difficulty to get drilling done. In the case in Slovakia, where we're about to start drilling in late May on the Kolba cobalt copper asset.
Okay.
Those holes generally take between 6 to 8 weeks to permit, which is fairly competitive. In Finland, we've got over 100 now drill holes to sample before we start drilling ourselves because of the core library. But we expect similar drill. It's possibly going to take a little bit longer to permit holes in Finland. But anyway, I'm jumping the gun maybe to operations.
Yeah, can we just focus on Slovakia for a minute, because I know the market's got pretty excited about Finland, and I guess I want to do that in the second half. Because when I last spoke to you, not on small caps, but just direct face-to-face, it was very much about Slovakia. Given that you've got these results coming out of Finland and the market really likes that, and by the way, you also said this is not an overnight thing. We've been working on this in the background, just haven't been talking about it. So my question for you is, are you still going to focus on Slovakia, or do you see the value upside in Finland more than Slovakia? I guess I just want to find out news flow going forward in 23, that's going to look like.
Look, I think importantly, for example, we haven't got two teams. It's one team working on both assets. So, and there are drill seasons. It's not both jurisdictions. You can't drill all year round. Maybe Korsnäs you can in the south of Finland. So what's likely to occur is drill news flow from Slovakia in the southern winter and the northern summer. And the Finnish assets, particularly the northern asset at Jockey Kangas, is best drilled in the northern winter, believe it or not, because the conditions are more stable when there's ice rather than swamplands. And however, I do think Korsnäs, after having been there last week, is a year-round project because it's an old mine. But what we did recognise with the Slovakian assets was there was a significant hiatus in work well, of course, we utilised that time, but we couldn't really work over the depths of winter. In Central Europe, they're not as well as equipped as the Finns for drilling through the winter. And so we had a unavoidable sort of news flow hiatus, and we're not necessarily trying to avoid that for the sake of it, but we had a team that was slightly idle in the northern winter, and they'll work in Finland, which, like last week, for example, sampling the core in Finland. Two of the guys with me are our Slovak team members. So what it's about is continuous work, really, and making sure of course, we'll end up with one project that is the company's focus, as always happens.
Right.
At the moment, there's a project in Slovakia, as you mentioned, Kolba, which we're drilling at the moment. That's shortly. That's the focus, and I don't know yet, but I believe the focus will be Korsnäs, the rare earth mine in Finland. To that end, we can switch the teams, one or the other, perhaps. Eventually we'll have to build up the Finnish team, but for now we're right with the admin team there.
Okay, so the focus, as you say, is Kolba, which is the cobalt, copper, and a bit of nickel, I think, down in Slovakia, and then in Finland, the Korsnäs rare earth project. But what's happening with and I can't pronounce these names, Sarenkila lithium.
Sarenkila. Well, you sound Finnish as well as looking Finnish, Karen. Yeah, that's Sarenkila is, and I guess this contradicts what I said earlier. It is slightly earlier stage project. There's pegmatite lithium float on the surface, and we need to find the in situ location for that. We know how to do that. It's called ionic leach sampling. Mm-hmm. So that'll happen over the summer. So there will be activities in Finland over the summer. I was there last week. It's an initiative by the Finnish government to highlight open tracts of lithium pegmatite ground. Most of that's pegged now. We just pegged a significant southern section or central section of the belt to our north. In fact, Rio Tinto pegged a few months ago, so it's a competitive environment. We know how to sample these. This ionic leach work is very effective through the glacial till. We took 3 or 4 samples last week. They're at the lab at the moment, at Outokumpu Lab ALS in Finland. I'm not sure, but I expect the results to be late May. That won't really influence the next program because we'll do the ionic leach anyway, and that could lead to drill results. So that is a little earlier stage than Korsnäs and the other rare earth project to the north that we call Joki Kangas. And I don't want to snow the audience with names, but effectively you need to have internal competition in the company for drill meters.
Right. And
the lithium project's not ready to drill yet. It needs some geochemistry done, which will happen over the summer.
You mentioned something a moment ago. I think you called it the Critical Raw Materials Act, in Europe. How does that impact Prospech? Is that a tax opportunity, or what's the goal of that act, and how does it impact you guys, if at all?
So because we're an exploration cash negative entity, we don't pay any tax, but what we do, the area it'll impact us, to answer you directly, is it should ease permitting and drilling. Okay. We've already seen anecdotally gentle pressure coming from Brussels through to Bratislava in Slovakia to expedite drill permitting, make sure projects go all the way. Because one of the issues, like it happens in Australia as well, is it's not really up to the state government or the federal government. These projects get approved when the local government signs off them. And as you know, that can be quite tricky. Everyone deserves to have a say, but there's generally opposition somewhere. The Europeans are very sensitive to the fact that the United States has put together the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a scheme basically of massive subsidies for rare earth projects. So what's happening is the limited talent pool of people who know how to look for rare earths are now looking at massive subsidies, even at the exploration stage, to explore in the continental US. So I don't know, generally it's supposed to improve our ability to permit projects. Okay. I don't see us getting any large grants or whatever, because we're not building yet another gigafactory, which I don't think Europe needs any more of, by the way. The problem now is supply, which is where we come in.
Right. Yep.
Some of these gigafactories are being put together without any notion of supply, and that's a comment, but we believe will be well supported. We do think that we want to limit it to the 2 jurisdictions. You can't be everywhere for a company our size for admin purposes, and there's plenty of other projects to look at in Finland and Slovakia for that matter.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I guess, yeah, we see healthy streamlining of permitting departments. Recently, Sweden, for example, diminished the environmental department and broke it up and put the environmental officers in the various other government departments because they were not allowing permitting of projects at any level in the country. So there was swift action from the new Swedish government. So we think that's positive. Of course, you need environmental laws and rules. We follow the rules, but things probably swayed too far to one side in Europe, and that's come to an abrupt end, which is positive.
It is positive. I'm conscious of time. I just want to ask you, I've got a couple of questions here around news flow, but also before I get into the news flow, that recent capital raise that you did for just over 2 million, use of funds. Can you just explain to us how those funds are going to be used as we head into the second half of 23?
So nominally it's split evenly between the 2 jurisdictions, mostly on drilling because we're well prepared on drill sampling at Finland, which is this year, which is lower cost, obviously. The drilling's already been done by previous companies. We're just sampling that core.
Okay.
Because in one case, the cores are only assaying for lead. So in some cases, the core wasn't sampled at all because they viewed it and had no lead. So they just left it whole core. But most of the money will go towards drilling in Slovakia and drill sampling in Finland. There will be some small payments to third parties to clean up internal tenements, things like that.
Okay.
But we think that money should see us well for at least a 2-year program. I know it seems modest, but what we're trying to do is just a steady flow of drill results in order for us internally to rank the best project. The capital raise means our share base has been expanded by 2-fold, and we have a lot of new shareholders on board who are keen to see the progress. So yeah, no, it was fully underwritten, which is unusual these days, and BW Equities did very well.
Is it a little bit more cost effective in Europe than it would be in, say, Australia or the US, do you think, or even Canada, I guess?
Yeah, look, drilling's roughly the same cost as Australia. I do see personnel costs are lower. Permitting, legal costs are lower in Europe for sure. Things are more and more streamlined. You have differences between states in Australia, like you have differences between Finland and Slovakia, which are effectively 2 states within the EU. So, but certainly cost-wise, we are low on expats. It's only myself and John Levings, full-time expats there. So we don't employ an army of people flying in and out. That's one key point is every single Slovak team and Finnish team member drive to site, things like that. So yeah, costs are reasonable. We think we're spending about 65% of our dollars on direct drilling at the moment.
Oh, well, that's music to a lot of people's ears, in my opinion. Just quietly, 65%, that's pretty good. Jason, first time we've chatted. I like to wrap things up, if you like, in a little Tiffany box. And I guess it's the summary. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, not financial advice. Reach out to Jason if you want some more information, because we can't get through everything. But this is just to let you know that I think Prospech, I don't think the markets realize that Prospech, not only are they looking at Slovakia, but they're also got this rare earth / lithium project up there in Finland. And it was interesting what you just said, Jason, which is small team. It's almost like Mike Dunbar would say, it's the cricket season and the football season. You're making the most of the guys that you've got there in the right months. So let's wrap it all up. Give me 3 reasons why our beautiful audience out there should be sitting up and taking notice of PRS right now.
I think reason number 1 is Brownfields drill out job. So we're not out exploring for something we're not sure is there. We know it's there. It's just about how big. Number 2, is the commodity focus is topical and will be supported if we get decent results. So rare earths, of course, precious metals as a backup, but strategic metals as well, including cobalt. And number 3, which is an intangible in a way, but it is important, is we have a very solid core shareholder base who followed the money. And that means that you have a very tight register, in fact, of investors rather than traders in the company. So in my view, despite, and I won't make comments about our value, that's up to the market. Mm-hmm. But we think it's a very moderate risk investment opportunity to be, and it's an option on rare earths and strategic metals in the EU.
And I think one of the two comments. One, ladies and gentlemen, he's done it before. He knows what he's, and I'm talking about Jason here. And also, I don't know if many people picked it up, but that Finnish project, Rio Tinto, just to the north, I think they're abutting each other. So Rio Tinto don't go into places unless they sniff that there's a bit of an opportunity there. Again, not financial advice. Do your own research. But Jason, make sure you come back and maybe post those drill results, give us an update. But for now, thanks so much for joining me on Small Caps.
Well, thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Small Caps, and your audience for tuning in. Thank you.